My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 31, and I'll never forget that Christmas dinner when my brother leaned toward my mother and whispered, "She still thinks that silly job means anything." The whole table laughed softly at first, then louder rippling, like the crackle of the fireplace behind us. I sat there with my spoon halfway to my lips, pretending not to hear, pretending not to care. But my hand trembled, and the silver clinked against the porcelain, echoing louder than their laughter. The chandelier light seemed to mock me, reflecting a distorted version of my smile in the glass of wine before me. Have you ever sat at a family table, smiling, while they dissect your life like it's gossip fodder? You nod, you sip your wine, you play along, because fighting back only feeds them. That night I stayed quiet, because what none of them knew, what even my father couldn't guess, was that the silly job they mocked would soon make headlines. And when it did, every smirk, every condescending word would come rushing back to haunt them. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was the sound of ice cracking in Logan's glass and the soft, venomous lilt in his voice when he said my name. The air was heavy with the scent of roasted turkey and expensive Cabernet, a richness that only magnified the bitterness I felt. The Carter Christmas dinners had always been a performance, but that year it felt like a play I'd outgrown. The house gleamed under garlands of gold and white. My mother Victoria moved like a queen hosting a royal banquet, her diamond earrings catching the firelight. My father George sat quietly at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Logan, my older brother, occupied the center like a stage. His tailored gray suit, that silver watch flashing every time he lifted his glass, it all screamed success. I wore a plain green sweater, the same one I'd worn the year before and the year before that. The cuffs were frayed. My hair was still damp from the snow outside. So my mother began pouring more Cabernet into Logan's glass. "Tell us again about the merger, dear. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal." "What was it, 10 billion 11?" Logan corrected with a smile that could sell anything. "We closed last week. Record-breaking for Morgan Investments." My father nodded, once proud, but restrained. "You've done well, son." And then all eyes turned almost automatically to me. Mom's smile thinned. "And you, Olivia, still working on those wave things, eco-wave technologies," I said quietly. The words felt small, lost in the opulent gleam of the table. I could feel the heat from the flickering candles on my face, a stark contrast to the cold tone in her voice. Logan chuckled. "Right. The Save the Ocean hobby." My jaw tightened. "It's not a hobby." He leaned back, swirling his wine. "Come on, Liv. You're too smart for that nonsense. You could have joined me years ago, real career, real money. Instead, you're out there playing with salt water." His condescending tone was sharper than the polished silverware beside my plate. The table erupted in polite laughter. Even my mother giggled behind her napkin. My father didn't laugh, but he didn't stop them either. I forced a smile, my eyes on my plate. "Someone has to clean up after your client's spills." The laughter dimmed just a little, but Logan's grin never faltered. "Touché. Still live, one of these days you'll realize ideals don't pay rent." His words were smooth as silk, but every one of them cut. I wanted to throw my glass to shout that I'd been working 18-hour days trying to prove that the ocean could power homes. I wanted to tell them that I'd built something that mattered. But what good would it do? They weren't listening. They never had. So I smiled. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. My younger cousin Emma, sitting beside me, turned with innocent eyes. "Aunt Victoria says you build machines for fish. Is that true?" The laughter came again, louder this time. My mother patted Emma's head affectionately. "Not quite, darling. Olivia just hasn't found her footing yet." I pressed my spoon into my palm until my nails left marks. Inside, two voices warred. One screamed, "Say something, prove them wrong." The other whispered, "Not yet, let them laugh. Tomorrow you'll have proof." I looked around the table, golden cutlery, flickering candles, Logan's smug smile, and I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation burned, but underneath it, something harder was forming. Resolve. My father caught my gaze. His eyes, quiet and gray, lingered on me just long enough to say what he never spoke aloud. Hold on. I gave him the smallest nod. Then my mother's voice broke the silence. Logan, tell us about that new apartment in Tribeca. I saw the photos. Gorgeous view. Logan leaned forward, his voice rising with pride. Penthouse level. River view. The kind of place that reminds you what hard work gets you. The irony almost made me laugh. Because my hard work wasn't on a skyline, it was in a cold garage by the coast among wires, salt, and failure. But it was mine. They kept talking about deals, cars, vacations, but their voices faded into a blur. I watched the fire instead, the way it flickered, hungry and alive. I thought of the turbines in my lab spinning quietly in tanks of water, capturing the rhythm of waves. Everyone around that table believed Logan's power was untouchable. But power built on ego always cracks first. I didn't know it yet, but this was the night that would mark the line between who I had been and who I would become. The laughter resumed, bright and hollow. I lifted my wine glass and joined in. Because sometimes revenge doesn't begin with rage. It begins with silence. Later, after the guests left and the house grew quiet, I walked alone onto the back porch. The snow had stopped, and the sky above Seattle shimmered with a pale, cold moon. My breath fogged in the air as I looked out over the frozen lake behind our home. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass of the window, tired, small, and visible. But behind that reflection, somewhere deep, I could feel the hum of something vast. The sound of waves rolling beneath ice, the heartbeat of the ocean that had always called me back. I whispered to no one, "Let them think it's silly. Tomorrow they'll see." The wind picked up, brushing my hair across my face. I turned and went back inside, leaving footprints across the snow. And somewhere far away on the cold coast of Oregon, a small turbine I had built began to spin. They buried him by the sea. I still remember the color of the sky that day, gray like steel, heavy and silent. Waves crashed against the rocks, echoing the ache in my chest. The wind off the Oregon coast was so sharp it cut through my coat, but I didn't move. I stood there clutching a single white lily, staring at the coffin as they lowered it into the ground. Liam had always said he wanted to be close to the water. I just never thought it would be like this. He was my closest friend in college. Brilliant, restless, always talking about how the ocean could power the future. We met at MIT, both obsessed with renewable energy. While everyone else was chasing Silicon Valley dreams, Liam wanted to make waves work for people. Literally. "We'll give back what humanity took," he used to say, eyes bright with impossible faith. Then one spring afternoon, the call came. There'd been a spill off Monterey Bay. A rescue drone meant to guide a cleanup crew failed in the rough weather. The containment rig collapsed, leaving chaos in its wake. Liam, who had been on site to test a prototype, didn't come back. His death wasn't a sudden violent end, but a quiet disappearance swallowed by the sea he loved. At his funeral, as the tide crawled up the shore, I dropped the lily into the surf and whispered, "I'll finish what you started." The words came out small, almost swallowed by the wind. But something in me shifted. I didn't know how or when, but I knew that the ocean wouldn't take without giving something back. That promise became the anchor of everything I did next. 2 years later, I graduated from MIT with honors. My mother, Victoria, hosted a dinner to celebrate linen napkins, silverware, and a dozen of Logan's colleagues flown in from New York. She loved appearances. "You've made us proud," she said that night, her red lipstick precise, her smile tighter than usual. "Now it's time to think practically. Morgan Investments is hiring. Your brother can get you in." I had already decided. "Mom," I said softly, "I'm moving to San Diego. There's a research group there working on ocean turbines." Her fork clattered against her plate. "San Diego. For that hobby." "Not a hobby," I replied. "It's a prototype for renewable marine energy." She let out a breathless laugh like she'd heard a bad joke. "Oh, Olivia, no one's paying for fairy tales about waves." Logan leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Let her play mom. She'll come around when the rent's due." Their laughter stung more than I wanted to admit. My father said nothing, he rarely did, but when everyone left, he knocked quietly on my bedroom door. He carried a small wooden box, his hands trembling slightly from age. Inside was a bronze miniature turbine, delicate and handmade. It was my grandfather who first told me that the sea never forgets. He used to build small windmills for me when I was little. It doesn't work, my father said, smiling faintly, but it spins when the wind's right. Maybe you'll make one that never stops. I traced the metal with my fingers. You believe in me? He nodded. I believe in what's quiet and steady, like the sea. That night after they'd gone to bed, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed against the darkness. I typed the words, Eco-Wave Technologies, harnessing power from the ocean. The name felt right, solid, like a heartbeat. The garage was never meant to be a company. It was barely even a workspace, just a cracked concrete floor, a single buzzing light bulb, and the sound of waves slamming the rocks a few blocks away. But it was mine, my little corner of chaos where dreamers built things no one believed in. When Maya showed up that first morning, I didn't know if I was meeting a genius or another romantic idealist like me. She arrived carrying a backpack full of wires and an iced coffee the size of her head. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, her face lit with curiosity. "You're Olivia Carter?" she asked, brushing snow from her coat. "Depends," I said, glancing up from the workbench. "Are you here to help or to tell me I'm crazy?" "Maybe both," she said with a grin, "but mostly help." That's how EcoWave really began, two women in a freezing garage, armed with cheap sensors and impossible ideas. We worked through the nights, layering sweaters, our fingers stained with grease. The air smelled of solder salt and stubborn hope. For months, we built prototypes that failed faster than we could test them. Corrosion imbalance, instability. The ocean was a cruel teacher, but with each failure we learned. Maya had an engineer's precision. I had a stubborn refusal to give up. One night, after countless failures, I tried something different. I adjusted the angle of the fins, coated the base with recycled polymer, rewired the sensors. My hands shook as I lowered it into the tank and flipped the switch. The blades began to turn slowly, then steadily. I stared, hardly breathing. The output meter flickered, then leveled at 0.3 volts. Barely anything, but it was something. Real. I laughed loud, reckless, half-crazed laughter that startled the seagulls outside. "You see, Liam? It's alive." When the adrenaline faded, exhaustion took its place. I collapsed into the old office chair, eyes burning, the faint hum of the turbine filling the room. It wasn't powered yet, but it was proof. A few hours later, while I was dozing with my head on the desk, my laptop pinged. A new email. From Maya Chen. Subject: I saw your video. I'm an engineer too. I want to help. I blinked, reread it twice. Some stranger believed in what I was doing. Outside, the ocean was stirring again, waves rolling toward the shore like an answer. I clicked reply. And as I typed those first few words, "Thank you for reaching out," I realized that my quiet promise on that cold Oregon beach was no longer just mine. The sea had started to listen. The glass walls made everything feel colder. The boardroom shimmered under fluorescent lights, the kind that drained faces of warmth and turned everyone into ghosts. Maya sat beside me, clutching a binder like a life raft. Across from us, 4 investors in tailored suits waited, polite smiles concealing boredom. It was our first major pitch, our shot at funding. I took a slow breath and began, voice steadier than I felt. EcoWave Technologies is building modular ocean turbines capable of generating consistent low-cost power from coastal currents. Scalable, renewable, sustainable. Slide after slide flashed on the screen, data charts, ocean maps, efficiency. Comparisons. I talked about energy equity, disaster relief, and climate resilience. I talked about possibilities. When I finished, there was silence. Then one of them, an older man with silver hair and a Mont Blanc pen, leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "So, ocean fans," he said, smiling faintly. My stomach dropped. "They're not fans. They're turbines." Sure. He interrupted, his polite smile never wavering. But come on, Miss Carter. You're telling me people will invest real money in underwater pinwheels. A quiet, calculated laugh rippled across the table. It was the laugh of men who had seen 1,000 dreams like mine and knew exactly how to dismiss them. They weren't cruel. They were simply done. The man beside him, a younger associate, maybe early 30s, chimed in. What's the projected ROI, I mean? Are we talking billions or just feel-good headlines? My jaw tightened. This was their game. I straightened my posture. Lives changed. Don't pay dividends, I said, looking him dead in the eye. But they create markets. We're building a business model on something that matters. The older man's pen tapped against his folder. I admire your passion. But passion doesn't scale. Investors need guarantees. He stood extending a hand. The meeting was over. I shook it coldly. We gathered our things in silence, the cool air from the windows, a sharp relief on my skin. The other investors looked away, a practiced show of disinterest. When we stepped out into the street, Boston's wind hit like a slap. Maya shoved her hands into her coat pockets, muttering, "Guess they'd rather fund another crypto app." Of course they would, I said, voice shaking. Easier to bet on greed than grit. We walked in silence for a while, boots crunching against the slush. My mind replayed their laughter, every dismissive smirk. That night back in the garage, I sat staring at the prototype in the test tank. The blades turned lazily under dim light, each spin whispering failure. I felt hollow. Maybe they're right, Maya said softly, sitting on the floor. Maybe the world isn't ready. No, I said quietly. The world doesn't get ready. We will make it ready. But the conviction sounded thinner than it used to. Days bled into nights. We pitched again to a tech incubator, to a green energy fund, even to a local news anchor who promised to shine a light on innovation. Each time the response was the same polite dismissal. Then came the article. It popped up online one morning, shared by some startup blog. EcoWave, great idea. No business model. The tagline was worse. Two idealists chasing a fantasy in a garage. My mother texted me a link with a single line, "I warned you." I deleted it without replying. By evening, the comment section was flooded. Cute concept. They should start a GoFundMe. Girls and their side hustles. Maya found me sitting on the garage floor, scrolling through the comments. "Stop reading that garbage," she said, snatching my phone. I exhaled. I thought if we proved it worked, people would see. "They will," she said. "Just not yet." But her voice trembled too. That night after she left, I stayed behind. The rain drummed on the roof, steady and relentless. I stared at the turbine, its slow spin reflected in the puddle on the floor. I thought of Logan. The way he smiled at Christmas. The way he dismissed me without even looking up. "You could have joined me years ago." I wondered if he'd read the article. Of course he had. He probably laughed. The shame burned deep, but beneath it something else stirred anger. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that sharpens. I stood, grabbed a notepad, and began sketching. The next design. A stronger, smarter turbine. One that couldn't be ignored. If the world wouldn't believe us, we'd make it impossible not to. By dawn, the floor was covered in sketches. Maya returned with coffee, took one look around and whistled. "You didn't sleep again." "Sleep's overrated," I said, grinning faintly. "Let's build." And we did. For weeks we rebuilt Wave 1 from the ground up, restructured the fins, reprogrammed the sensors, refined the casing. When it finally spun in the tank, it was silent, efficient, and beautiful. "This is it," Maya said, breathless. "Wave 2. I smiled. "No, Phoenix. Because we're done rising from ashes." A week later, a small coastal town in Oregon agreed to test Phoenix as a microgrid solution. The contract wasn't glamorous, but it was real. When I called my father to tell him, he sounded proud but cautious. "Just promise me you'll rest once in a while." "I will," I lied. As we loaded the van with equipment, Maya checked her phone. "Hey, did you see this?" she asked. Some financial blogs mentioned Morgan Investments. SEC might be sniffing around your brother's merger. I blinked. Seriously? She nodded. Rumors, but still. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Logan the golden child might finally have a crack in his perfect glass tower. I shoved the thought aside. Doesn't matter. We've got our own waves to chase. But that night, lying on the floor of the garage, I couldn't shake the image of his face if those rumors ever turned true. Maybe, just maybe, the tides were starting to turn. And this time, they were on my side. The envelope was buried under bills. I almost threw it away. It looked like junk mail white, unmarked, the kind of thing you don't open unless you're desperate. And I was desperate. Rent was due. Our testing site in Oregon was behind schedule. The van had broken down twice that month. Maya was sleeping on a cot in the garage, and I'd stopped answering my mother's calls altogether. But when I tore the letter open, something inside me shifted. It wasn't from a company, not from a lawyer or a creditor. It was from a woman in Maine named Helen Brooks. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink slightly smudged. Dear Miss Carter, my husband used to work at the docks before he fell ill. We lost most of our savings after his diagnosis. The power lines to our cottage go down often, and I read about your turbines online. A small one could help us run his oxygen machine during outages. I can't pay much, but if you have an old prototype, please let me know. With gratitude, Helen Brooks. I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands were trembling. All the investor meetings, the humiliations, the articles that called me naive, they all felt irrelevant next to this single page of desperation. Someone believed we could help. Maya found me sitting there, the letter open on my lap. What's that? I read it aloud. Her face softened. She wants us to send her a prototype. She needs one, I said. She doesn't care about ROI or scaling or margins. She just needs power. Maya hesitated. Olivia, we can't afford to give away equipment. We barely have enough for testing. I looked at her eyes burning. Then we'll find a way. That night we worked until dawn modifying one of our old Wave 1 turbines. We reinforced the casing, replaced the corroded parts, and made it small enough to ship. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady, reliable. When the sun came up, I packed it carefully, wrapped it in recycled foam, and wrote a note to tuck inside. For when the power fails, let the ocean keep him breathing. A week later, we got an email with a photo. Helen standing on a snowy porch, a small wind and wave hybrid unit beside her, the ocean visible in the background. Her husband, thin but smiling, sitting beside her wrapped in a blanket. The caption read, "It works. You gave us light when no one else could. Thank you." Maya read it over my shoulder and whispered, "Holy hell." We printed the email and taped it to the garage wall. Right above it, I wrote in black marker proof. Something changed after that. It wasn't money, it was momentum. The story spread quietly. A small online publication picked it up, calling us two women redefining renewable energy one turbine at a time. The article didn't go viral, but it reached the right people. Within a week, we received 10 new inquiries. A month later, 50. One message came from a coastal hospital in Florida, another from a disaster relief organization. They wanted to buy, not donate, not invest, buy. For the first time, our bank account showed more than 2 digits. I wanted to call my father, tell him we were finally getting somewhere. But when I reached for my phone, I froze. I knew he'd answer softly with quiet pride. But my mother. She'd say, "That's nice, dear. But how sustainable is it?" I wasn't ready to hear that yet. Instead, I emailed the hospital directly offering to install the first full-scale Phoenix model. Maya nearly fell off her chair when she saw the message. "We don't even have a travel budget. We'll drive," I said. "It's Florida, not the moon." 3 days later, we were on the road. The drive was long and brutal snowstorms through Virginia, endless stretches of highway through Georgia, but it felt like freedom. Somewhere outside Jacksonville, as the coastline came into view, I looked out at the Atlantic and whispered, We're coming for you, world. At the hospital, the air smelled like salt and antiseptic. The chief engineer greeted us skeptical but polite. So this little thing's gonna keep our generators running during storms? I met his gaze. It's going to give you something backup power never could continuity. We worked for 3 days straight installing calibrating testing. When the turbine finally came online, the readout showed perfect stability. The hospital's backup grid lit green. The engineer's jaw dropped. You actually did it. Maya laughed exhausted. We usually do. That night we slept in the hospital parking lot, curled up under blankets, the turbine humming softly in the distance. For once, I didn't dream of failure. When we returned to Seattle, I found another letter waiting for me. This one wasn't handwritten. It was printed on heavy paper, embossed with a logo I didn't recognize, Blue Horizon Ventures. I unfolded it slowly. Miss Carter, we've been following EcoWave's progress. Your work has reached us through various channels, and we believe your technology aligns with our environmental investment goals. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss potential funding. Maya read over my shoulder, mouth open. Blue Horizon. They're massive. I know, I whispered, but beneath the excitement was something darker dread. Because I'd been here before. The room that laughed. The suits, the polite smiles, the dismissals. Still, I couldn't ignore it. The night before the meeting, I called my father for the first time in months. He answered on the third ring. Liv, he said quietly, like he'd been waiting. I might have a real chance this time, I said. He didn't ask for numbers, didn't ask about returns. He just said, make sure they see who you are, not just what you built. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Across the room, the photo of Helen and her husband caught the light. Their smiles reminded me why we started. So the next morning when I walked into Blue Horizon's sleek headquarters, glass marble, everything Logan would have loved. I didn't wear a power suit or heels. I wore the same gray sweater I'd soldered circuits in, and when the elevator doors opened and I stepped into that gleaming boardroom, I whispered to myself, they laughed once, never again. The boardroom was all glass and silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Seattle skyline, rain streaking the glass in thin silver lines. A long polished table stretched between me and 6 investors who looked like they'd been carved from stone. They were everything I had expected, sharp suits, perfect posture, eyes like calculators. I stood at the far end, laptop, open heart pounding so loudly I was sure the sound filled the room. Miss Carter, said the woman at the center, short silver blonde hair, flawless navy suit. Her name was Clara Maddox, Blue Horizon's managing partner. You've got 20 minutes. I nodded. That's all I need. The lights dimmed slightly as my slides came to life on the screen behind me. I began the same way I always did, steady voice, simple truth. Every minute the ocean generates enough kinetic energy to power a city. We just haven't learned how to listen to it yet. I walked them through the story. How EcoWave began in a garage. How our turbines turned the tide for small coastal communities. How Helen Brooks' husband could breathe during blackouts because of us. But I didn't talk about numbers first. I talked about people. The room stayed silent. Not mocking, not impatient, listening. I took a breath, steadying myself, and clicked to the next slide. Graphs, cost, breakdowns, projections, all the things investors cared about. I'd memorized every data point. Wave 2. Our Phoenix model produces 110% more energy than its predecessor. At scale, our unit cost drops below $200 per kilowatt hour. That's less than wind or solar in comparable regions. A man to Clara's left gray beard and gold cufflinks leaned forward. What about durability? Saltwater's brutality on infrastructure. I smiled. We've coated the blades in marine-grade polymer and integrated self-cleaning sensors. The ocean can fight back, we're ready for that. Clara's expression didn't change. And government support, pending approval, I said, meeting her eyes. But we're not waiting for permission. The technology works. We're already powering hospitals and coastal shelters. We don't need bureaucracy to prove what's real. Something flickered in her eyes, interest, maybe admiration. When I reached my final slide, I said quietly, "You can invest in another app, another algorithm, or you can invest in power that never stops moving." The room went still. Then Clara leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Tell me something, Miss Carter. If this works, and I'm not saying it doesn't, what's your endgame? Sell, license, IPO?" I hesitated. Every startup founder had a prepared answer. I didn't. I just spoke from the truth sitting in my chest. "My endgame," I said, "is to make sure a mother in Maine never has to write another letter like the one I got last year. Power shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a given." The silence stretched again. I could hear the hum of the projector, the faint ticking of someone's watch. Finally, Clara smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips. "You know, Miss Carter, I've sat in this room for 20 years, heard hundreds of pitches. 99% are noise. Yours isn't." My breath caught. She nodded toward her assistant. "Prepare a term sheet. I want a full due diligence review on EcoWave by the end of week." The assistant blinked. "Ma'am, are you saying I'm in?" Clara interrupted. 50 million in seed capital, contingent on performance metrics and partnership conditions." I just stared at her. 50 million. Maya, sitting in the back, made a strangled sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. Clara rose, extended her hand. "Congratulations, Miss Carter. I believe the ocean's about to get a lot louder." Her handshake was firm, her eyes steady. I felt the world tilt beneath me. When Maya and I stepped out of the building, the rain had stopped. The sky was the pale color of new beginnings. We stood there on the wet sidewalk, speechless. Maya finally broke the silence. "Did that really just happen?" I laughed, a full, unrestrained laugh that startled passing pedestrians. "Yeah," I said, "it really did." We went back to the garage that night, still damp from the rain, and opened a bottle of champagne we'd been saving for some day. "To Blue Horizon," Maya said, raising her glass. "To the waves," I replied, clinking mine against hers. They finally noticed. The next few weeks were chaotic. Lawyers, accountants, endless video calls. I'd never signed so many documents in my life. EcoWave became a real company overnight, new facility, new staff, real paychecks. But beneath the celebration, I could feel something heavy lurking. Success changes everything, especially how people look at you. Logan called first. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Olivia, I saw the press release. Impressive. Didn't know your little project had legs. Guess it wasn't so silly after all," I said. He chuckled. "Touché. Listen, we should talk. My firm's exploring ESG funds, we might even cross paths." I could almost hear the smirk through the phone. "We'll see, Logan." When I hung up, my chest was tight. For years, he'd been the one soaring while I crawled. Now the ground was shifting. Blue Horizon's backing brought attention fast. Reporters started calling, asking about the female founder shaking up clean tech. One morning, Forbes published a feature, EcoWave, the startup turning ocean motion into billions. The article ended with a line that made my heart race. If Olivia Carter's vision holds, she might be the next big name in sustainable energy. I should have been elated. But all I could think about was that Christmas table. Logan's laughter. My mother's dismissive smile. They'd all see it. They'd read my name. And the next family dinner would never be the same. That night, as I walked through the new office, our office rows of humming prototypes lit the room in soft blue. Maya stood at the far end running diagnostics. "Think they'll laugh now?" she asked without looking up. I smiled. "No," I said quietly. "Now they'll listen." Outside, the ocean roared against the shore, relentless and steady. It sounded at last like applause. The first thing I noticed when I stepped off the plane in Seattle was the smell, pine trees and rain, the scent of every Christmas I'd ever known. The city shimmered beneath holiday lights, cold and perfect, as if mocking the chaos spinning inside me. Blue Horizon had wired the funding 2 weeks earlier. EcoWave was officially valued at over $800 million. We were expanding to 4 new test sites, hiring a team of 50 fielding press interviews from every corner of the country. And yet all I could think about was that dining room, that table, the laughter. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, as we loaded the rental car with gifts and a single bottle of wine. "No," I said, shutting the trunk. "But I think I need to see their faces when they realize it's real." The snow had begun to fall as I pulled into the driveway. Through the window I could already see Logan laughing, gesturing wildly as he told one of his signature success stories. He looked every bit the Wall Street kingpin navy suit, Rolex gleaming confidence dripping off him like cologne. I hesitated at the door, my hand frozen on the knob. Then I took a breath and walked inside. "Olivia." My mother's voice rang out. She hurried toward me, her perfume filling the air. "You made it. We weren't sure you'd come this year." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a smile. Logan rose from the table, his grin wide and knowing. "Well, look who it is. The ocean whisperer herself. Still chasing waves, sis." The room laughed. The same familiar sound, warm and cruel. I set the bottle of wine on the counter. "Still chasing, yeah," I said evenly. "But I'm finally catching up." My mother waved a dismissive hand. "You always were the dreamer. Logan, tell her about the acquisition. 20 billion, can you believe it? Your brother's firm is making history." Logan straightened proudly. "Not quite 20, Mother, but close." He turned to me, eyes gleaming. "And what about you, Liv, still working from your garage?" I held his gaze. "Actually, it's an R&D facility now. We just signed our Series A Blue Horizon Ventures. You've heard of them." The room went quiet. Even the crackle of the fireplace seemed to pause. My mother's smile faltered. "Blue Horizon. 50 million in funding," I said casually, slipping off my coat. "We're expanding globally next quarter." Logan blinked. "You're joking." I met his stare. "You laughed last time, too." For the first time I could remember, he didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, wineglass in hand, a smile fading as realization sank in. My father cleared his throat softly. "That's extraordinary, Olivia." "Thanks, Dad," I said. My mother forced a laugh, fragile and high. "Well, isn't that wonderful? Our family's full of success stories. Both my children are making headlines." Logan's jaw tightened. "Some of us more than others." Dinner felt like a performance no one had rehearsed for. My mother kept trying to steer conversation toward Logan's firm, but even she couldn't hide her curiosity. My phone buzzed twice, reporters again, but I ignored it. At one point, my cousin Emma piped up. "Aunt Victoria." "Did you see the article Olivia was in, Forbes?" Every fork at the table froze midair. Logan's face went pale. "Forbes?" I smiled faintly. Front page. They called EcoWave the future of renewable energy. My mother reached for her wineglass. "Well," she murmured, "I suppose silly jobs can surprise us sometimes." Her tone was light, but her hand trembled as she set the glass down. Across the table, my father caught my eye. He didn't say anything, but his small nod said everything I told you they'd see it one day. For a while, we ate in silence. Snow fell thick and slow outside, blanketing the lake in white. Then, as if trying to reclaim control, Logan cleared his throat. "Well," he said, his grin returning, "while you're saving the planet, some of us are still saving the economy. We're finalizing a merger next quarter that'll make Morgan Investments one of the top 3 firms on the East Coast." "Congratulations," I said softly. "I heard rumors about that merger." He looked up sharply. "Rumors about regulatory scrutiny, SEC interest, something about hidden debt from a partner bank." His fork froze halfway to his mouth. The room went still again. "Where'd you hear that?" he asked. I shrugged. "The energy sector hears things. You'd be surprised who reads financial data these days." My father coughed into his napkin to hide a smirk. My mother's eyes darted between us. "Logan, is that true?" "It's nothing," he snapped. "Gossip. You know how markets are." I leaned back in my chair, the faintest smile playing at my lips. Of course, just gossip. He glared at me, but the silence that followed wasn't victory for him anymore. After dinner, I slipped outside to the porch. The air was crisp, the world glittering with snow. I could hear muffled laughter from inside my mother trying to salvage the evening, Logan pretending to be fine. My father joined me a few minutes later, wrapping his coat tighter. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "I didn't want to gloat," I said, "but I needed them to know." He nodded. "They know." We stood there a while, watching the snow fall over the lake. Then he added, "You've built something real, Liv. Don't let their pride steal your peace." I smiled, eyes stinging from the cold, and maybe something else. "Thanks, Dad." When I went back inside, Logan was standing alone by the fire, scrolling through his phone. His expression was tight, his jaw rigid. I caught the reflection of a headline on his screen: "Morgan Merger, under review SEC. Investigating accounting irregularities." He looked up at me, panic flickering behind the bravado. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Nothing," I said. The truth has a way of floating up, kind of like oil spills. For the first time, he looked small. I picked up my coat. "Merry Christmas, Logan." When I stepped out into the snow, the world felt brighter, lighter. Behind me, the laughter had stopped. And ahead of me, for the first time in years, the path felt completely, beautifully clear. I woke before dawn, my phone buzzing so violently on the nightstand that I thought it was an alarm. The room was still dark, the faint glow of Christmas lights from the window reflecting across the floor. I squinted at the screen, half asleep, and saw the subject line that would change everything. Forbes feature: Olivia Carter, the woman turning waves into wealth. For a long second, I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I tapped the link, and there it was, my face smiling against a backdrop of turbines and sea spray. The headline blazed in white letters: "From Garage to Global Eco-Wave Technologies Reaches Billion-Dollar Valuation." A sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a laugh. I sat up, clutching the phone with shaking hands. My inbox exploded with notifications, hundreds of emails, texts, calls, reporters, colleagues, strangers. The next alert came from CNBC. Blue Horizon's bet on ocean energy pays off. EcoWave joins the Clean Tech Billionaire Club. My picture was everywhere on their website, on LinkedIn, on a dozen industry feeds. I scrolled until my own name blurred. Maya burst through the door, barefoot, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and a look of disbelief. "Liv," she said, holding up her phone. "We're on the front page." The front page. I couldn't even answer. I just nodded, laughing, crying both at once. We stood there in stunned silence, watching the screen refresh again and again, headlines multiplying like wildfire. Then, almost on cue, my phone buzzed again. "Dad." I answered immediately. "Hi, Dad." His voice was steady but thick with emotion. "You did it, Liv. You really did it." "I guess so," I whispered. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. And then softer, "You've earned this. Don't let anyone make you feel like you didn't." Tears filled my eyes. "Thanks, Dad." After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the window. Outside, the world was waking, snow-melting light spreading across the horizon. But inside, everything was different. Maya threw her arms around me. "You realize what this means, right? We're officially in the big leagues." "I don't care about that," I said quietly. I finally proved it." She grinned. "Then let's make the world see it too." By 8 a.m., CNBC had called for an interview. Blue Horizon's PR team was already preparing a statement. The EcoWave website crashed from traffic. And while I was sitting there, hair unbrushed, coffee gone cold, my name trended on Twitter for the first time. Half an hour later, a text appeared from an unknown number. "Logan, call me. Now." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the reply button, but I didn't answer. Not yet. I flipped through channels until I found CNBC. My face appeared again, framed by the anchor's excited tone. This morning, Forbes announced that Olivia Carter, founder of EcoWave Technologies, has become one of the youngest billionaires in renewable energy. Her ocean-powered turbines are being hailed as a revolutionary step in clean infrastructure. Let's take a look at how this Seattle startup rose from a garage to global prominence. The broadcast cut to clips of our lab, the prototypes spinning in water, Maya laughing during a test, the waves thrashing against the docks. My voice played over the footage from a previous interview. The ocean never stops moving, and neither do we. The anchor smiled. A remarkable journey, especially considering that Carter faced repeated rejection early on. I think we can all agree she's having the last laugh now. The words sank deep, like an echo from years of humiliation. I thought of that Christmas dinner years ago, the laughter, the way Logan leaned across the table to whisper that I'd never make it. I thought of my mother's polite smile, my silence, my spoon frozen above the soup. And now the whole world was watching the woman they had dismissed. At that exact moment, somewhere across town, I imagined my family sitting in their kitchen. The same red brick house, the same morning ritual. My mother is pouring her coffee, my father reading the paper. The TV was droning in the background until my name caught her ear. I could picture her turning the cup slipping from her hand as she stared at the screen. Me. On Forbes. A billionaire. The cup would shatter. The coffee would stain her slippers. And for once, she wouldn't have a word to say. I didn't need to see it to know it happened. At 8:43 a.m., Logan's name flashed again. I finally answered. "Olivia," he said, breathless. You're everywhere." What the hell? "Good morning, Logan," I said calmly. "I guess the silly job worked out." He didn't laugh. "Listen, this isn't funny. Things are complicated here. The merger's in trouble. SEC's on us. I need—" "Careful," I said. "You almost sound like you're asking for help." Silence. "I'm not asking for charity," he snapped. "But if you just say something good about me to the press, maybe I cut him off. You mocked me for years, Logan. You made me feel small in every room we shared. And now you want me to fix your reputation." His breathing grew unsteady. "Please, you don't understand what it's like." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You built your empire on arrogance, and now the tide's coming in." He said nothing. "Good luck, Logan," I finished softly. "You're going to need it." I hung up before he could respond. Outside, the city was fully awake now, horns blaring, lights flickering across wet streets. I stepped to the window, watching people hurry to work, oblivious that the world had just tilted slightly on its axis. Behind me, Maya turned up the volume on the TV again. The anchor's voice echoed through the apartment, Olivia Carter Forbes' newest billionaire. Proof that persistence, innovation, and vision can rewrite even the cruelest odds. I smiled, not because of the money or the fame or the validation, but because the laughter that once defined me was finally gone. It had been replaced by something else entirely: silence. The kind that only follows after a storm. And in that silence, I could hear the waves again, steady, endless, whispering the truth I had always known. The ocean never forgets. Who dared to believe in it? The morning after the cafe felt like waking into someone else's life. The city outside was gray rain streaking down glass like tears the sky didn't want to shed. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, scrolling through headlines that painted the same picture from 100 different angles. Morgan Investments on the brink. Sources say Carter faces termination. SEC expands probe into Wall Street's fallen star. Each line felt both distant and inevitable. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, his downfall. The reversal, the poetic justice. But none of those fantasies had prepared me for the weight of actually seeing it unfold. There was a quiet sadness in realizing how final it all was. Maya came by mid-morning, tossing her coat on the sofa. "The world's officially upside down," she said. "You're trending as the visionary Carter, and your brother's name is all over the financial disaster feeds. Half of LinkedIn's writing thinks pieces about irony." "Ironic," I repeated softly, sipping the bitter coffee. "Yeah, that's one word for it." She studied me, brow furrowed. "You don't look happy." "I'm not sure I am," I admitted. "This isn't what I wanted." She sat beside me. "He humiliated you for years, Liv. You deserve to feel something good about this." "I do," I said after a pause. But maybe I wanted closure, not revenge. Before she could respond, my phone buzzed again, an email from the Financial Times. Subject line, invitation to join evaluation board, Morgan & Associates Asset Review. I stared at the words, reading them twice before I spoke. They want me. For what? Maya leaned over. To advise during the restructuring. I'd be assessing the company's remaining assets before liquidation. Her jaw dropped. Wait, you'd be sitting across from him. I nodded. Exactly. The email was formal, professional, but there was no mistaking the irony. The same firm that had dismissed me by association with my naive, idealistic family now wanted my judgment to save them from collapse. I accepted. When I arrived in New York 3 days later, the city was drenched in sleet. I stepped through the revolving glass doors of Morgan & Associates, the marble lobby echoing with the kind of silence that only follows catastrophe. The receptionist glanced up, recognition flickering in her eyes. Ms. Carter, she said quietly. They're expecting you upstairs. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked calm, but my heart thudded with the strange gravity of fate. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a boardroom lined with executives, 20 men in dark suits, their faces drawn tight. At the far end sat Logan. For a moment, neither of us moved. He looked smaller somehow. The immaculate posture was gone, the tailored confidence replaced by exhaustion. His tie hung loose, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. Ms. Carter, the chairman, said, gesturing to an empty seat near the head of the table. Thank you for joining us. I nodded, my voice steady. Thank you for the invitation. Logan didn't look up. The meeting began. Voices droning through financial jargon, liabilities, debt absorption, reputational risk. I listened, took notes, and waited. Then came my turn. Based on our findings, I said, sliding a folder onto the table, Morgan & Associates has overstated positive cash flow by nearly $400 million. These numbers were artificially propped up by 3 shell entities under the company's Cayman division. Murmurs rippled across the room. The chairman frowned. Are you certain of this? Yes, I said, clicking the remote. The screen behind me lit up with red numbers, transaction trails, falsified audits. The evidence is undeniable. Finally, Logan's head snapped up. His face was pale, jaw tight. This isn't accurate, he said, his voice cracking. Liv, you don't have to do this. We're family. Family? I interrupted, my voice low and steady. You weren't family when you laughed at me from across a dinner table. You weren't family when you called my work a silly hobby. Now, when your entire world is falling apart, you want to use that word? He flinched, his bravado crumbling. I was wrong. He whispered the words barely audible. Please, don't do this. I've lost everything. I met his gaze, the past and present colliding. I'm not doing anything, Logan. The truth is... A few of the board members exchanged looks, scribbling notes. One cleared his throat. Mr. Carter is there. Any explanation for these discrepancies? Logan hesitated. Then his shoulders slumped. No, he said finally, there isn't. The chairman exhaled slowly, closing his notebook. Then this meeting is adjourned. We'll move forward with liquidation and full compliance. One by one, the executives stood and left. The air felt heavier with every closing door until only the 2 of us remained. For a long moment, I didn't speak. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence between us. Logan ran a hand through his hair. You could have protected me, he said, his voice raw. I looked at him. Really looked past the arrogance, the polished image, the years of belittlement. All I saw now was a man who had built his worth on other people's approval and lost himself trying to keep it. I protected you for years, I said, softly. Every time I stayed quiet, every time I laughed along, every time I let you win. That's over now. His eyes glistened, and for a moment he seemed on the verge of saying something, apology, regret, I couldn't tell. But the words never came. I gathered my papers, slid them into my briefcase, and stood. You'll recover, I said gently. Maybe not your title, but yourself, if you let it happen. As I walked to the door, he spoke one last time. Liv, I paused. I was wrong, he said. About everything. I didn't turn back. I know. Outside, the wind cut sharp through the Manhattan streets, but I didn't feel cold. The air felt clean, almost new. The kind of clarity that only arrives after a storm has passed and the debris settles. I looked up at the skyline, the towers gleaming against a pale gray sky. For years he had stood above me, his success shadowing my every move. But now I wasn't beneath anything anymore. I was standing tall, the light finding me for once. And I realized something as I crossed the street toward my hotel. Revenge wasn't about destroying someone else's power. It was about reclaiming your own. 8 months later, I stood on the balcony of my home in Santa Barbara, the air warm and soft against my skin. Below, the Pacific stretched endlessly, blue, calm and steady. Waves rolled toward the shore in a slow rhythm, whispering the same sound that had once filled my garage in Seattle, back when EcoWave was nothing more than a dream stitched together by faith and sleepless nights. It had been months since the boardroom in Manhattan, since the moment I walked away from Logan and the ruins of Morgan and Associates. The world had moved on quickly, investors shifted, headlines faded, but I hadn't forgotten. The storm that once defined my life had finally calmed. Inside, my house was bright open, filled with sunlight. I didn't buy it for the status. I bought it for the view. Every wall was lined with framed letters, not certificates, not awards, but notes from families whose lives EcoWave had changed. One read, "Because of your turbines, our father still walks his favorite beach every morning. Thank you. Another, EcoWave's innovation saved our community when the grid failed. You gave us light." Each frame was a story, a reminder that what I built wasn't just profitable, it was purposeful. That afternoon, my parents were visiting for the first time. I waited by the front door, nerves humming beneath my calm exterior. I hadn't seen them in person since the Forbes feature. When the doorbell rang, my mother's voice floated through before I even opened it. "Olivia." "Oh my goodness, this place is breathtaking." She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She looked smaller than I remembered, her usual air of superiority softened by something new. Humility, maybe. My father followed slower. His familiar, steady smile grounding me instantly. My mother's eyes swept across the living room, lingering on the wall of letters. She walked toward them, touching the glass of one frame lightly. "These are from the families you've helped." I nodded. "Every single one." She turned, her expression faltering. "I was wrong, Olivia," she said quietly. "I didn't see what you were building. I didn't see you." For years I had imagined hearing those words, rehearsed them in my head, crafted the perfect responses full of sarcasm or triumph. But now, standing there with the ocean behind me and peace in my chest, all I felt was release. "It's okay, Mom," I said softly. "You don't have to apologize anymore." Her eyes glistened. "I do. I judged you because I was afraid. Afraid you'd fail. Afraid I'd have to watch you fall. I didn't realize falling was part of flying." I smiled faintly. Neither did I at first. My father came forward, then resting a hand on my shoulder. "I always knew you'd make it here," he said. His voice was steady, just like it had been on the nights when my dreams seemed impossible. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. We sat on the terrace for lunch. Grilled salmon, fresh bread, a bottle of California wine. The ocean shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in years, conversation flowed without tension. No comparisons, no subtle jabs, just family. Halfway through, my mother glanced toward the gate, frowning slightly. Was someone else supposed to join us? I followed her gaze and froze. Logan stood there. He wasn't the man who once strutted into rooms like he owned them. His suit was simple, his expression uncertain. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something humbler, heavier. "Olivia," he said quietly, stepping onto the patio. I didn't mean to intrude. My father stood tense but silent. My mother rose, two hands trembling as if unsure whether to embrace him or scold him. Logan looked at me. "I heard you were home. I just needed to see you." I gestured to an empty chair. "Then sit." He hesitated, then lowered himself into the seat across from me. For a long moment no one spoke. The ocean filled the silence, its waves steady and different. As I looked at him, the faded arrogance, the defeated slump of his shoulders, I was taken back to that Christmas dinner years ago. I saw him leaning over a flash of silver on his wrist, and the sound of his whispered words. "She still thinks that silly job means anything." I could still hear the ripple of laughter that followed, bright and hollow, echoing in my mind. For so long, that had been the story of him laughing from the pedestal of his success, and me shrinking into the humiliation of mine. But now, as I sat here, the silence wasn't a sign of my defeat. It was the calm after the storm, a testament to what I had built, while he had been too busy laughing. "Finally," he said, "I lost everything. The house, the firm, the reputation. But you—" He stopped, his voice cracking. "You built something real, something good. I mocked you for chasing dreams, but you were chasing a purpose. I didn't understand that until it was too late." My mother dabbed at her eyes. My father looked away, his jaw tight. Logan continued, "I came here because I needed to tell you I'm sorry. For everything, for the dinners, for the words. I can't take back for thinking success was something you could measure in dollar signs." I studied him, searching his face for the smugness that used to irritate me, but it wasn't there anymore. He looked like a man stripped bare by loss, rebuilt by humility. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "For a long time, the memory of you laughing at me was the fuel that kept me going. But I didn't want that to be my story anymore. You gave me the fire to build this, but now I'm at peace with it all." He nodded slowly, tears welling. "I know. And that's what saved you." A quiet fell over the table. My mother reached across, placing her hand over his. "You're still our son Logan. That doesn't change." He bowed his head. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Maybe not," I said gently, "but sometimes forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about moving forward." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Do you really forgive me?" I took a long breath, the kind that clears the space between who you were and who you've become. "I do," I said. "But you need to forgive yourself too." He nodded, voice breaking. "I'll try." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the ocean in gold, we all sat together, the same family that once fractured under comparison, now slowly piecing itself back together. After they left, I walked back inside. The house was quiet again, the letters on the wall glowing softly in the fading light. I stopped in front of a new frame I'd added that morning. It was from a woman in Maine. EcoWave helped power our coastal town during the blackout. "You gave us light when we had none." I smiled, tracing the words with my fingers. This was what I had fought for. Not the money, not the headlines, but the light. That night, as the waves whispered outside my window, I realized something profound. The truest revenge wasn't watching them fall. It was building something that rose higher than their doubts. And for the first time, I felt not the need to prove, but the quiet satisfaction of peace finally earned. The ocean was silver at dawn, the sun breaking over the horizon like a slow breath. I stood barefoot on the deck, coffee in hand, listening to the steady hush of the waves. That sound had always been my compass, gentle, patient, unstoppable. It has been 1 year since everything changed. 1 year since the world learned the name Olivia Carter, since my so-called silly job became the headline of Forbes, and since my brother's empire crumbled under the weight of his own arrogance. But as the tide rolled in, I realized none of that mattered as much as I once thought it would. The victory had been sweet, yes, but fleeting. What lasted was quieter, deeper. Peace. Inside the house was warm. Letters lined the walls, photos of my team. Maya, David, the engineers who had stuck through every sleepless night. They were my family too. On the dining table sat a new envelope postmarked from Maine. I opened it carefully. "Because of EcoWave, my husband can still fish the waters he loves. You gave him another year of life and us another Christmas together. Thank you, Olivia." I pressed the paper to my chest, my throat tightening. It never got old, those letters. Each one reminded me why I'd endured everything. That morning, my parents came over again, bringing cinnamon rolls and laughter. My mother looked softer these days. She didn't wear her pearls anymore, didn't speak in comparisons or expectations. My father has always carried quiet pride like armor. And then Logan arrived. He had moved to California a few months earlier, working quietly as a consultant for a small renewable finance firm. His suits were gone. He dressed in jeans and button-downs, now the color back in his face. He looked like someone learning to live again. He greeted me with a small smile. "I brought coffee," he said, holding up a tray of paper cups. "From the place on Main?" I asked. "Of course," he said, grinning faintly. "Even I know that's sacred." We all laughed, the sound easy, unforced. After breakfast, my parents took a walk along the beach, leaving Logan and me alone on the deck. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waves filled the silence. Finally, he said, "You know, every time I hear people talk about Echo Wave, they use words like revolutionary or visionary. But the truth is, what you did, it wasn't about proving them wrong, was it?" I shook my head. "Not anymore." "It started that way, though. For a long time, revenge was what kept me going." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know what that's like." I turned to face him. "But it changes you, doesn't it? The hunger to prove everyone wrong. It's exhausting." "It is," he said quietly. "And when you finally get what you wanted, you realize it's not what you needed." The ocean wind tugged at my hair. I looked at him, silly looked, this brother who had once mocked me, now humbled by his own fall and reborn by it. "You've changed," I said softly. He smiled, sad but genuine. "Losing everything has a way of stripping you down to who you really are. Turns out I'm not the man I thought I was. Maybe that's a good thing." We stood in silence for a while, watching the waves break against the rocks below. Then he said, "You know what I think, Liv? You didn't just build a company. You built a second chance for me, too." I blinked, surprised. "How?" He shrugged. "Because watching you climb out of the hole I pushed you into, it showed me I could climb out of mine." I smiled faintly. "You did that yourself." He looked out toward the horizon. "Maybe. But you gave me the map." Later that afternoon, my parents returned from their walk carrying seashells and wind-blown smiles. My mother joined me in the kitchen while I prepped tea. She picked up one of the letters from the counter, reading it silently. "You changed so many lives," she murmured, "and I almost made you stop before you began." I glanced at her. "You were scared for me." "I was," she admitted, "but I was also jealous. You had courage I never did." She looked at me, then eyes wet. "I used to think success was about who looked the most polished at the dinner table. But watching you, I see it's about who keeps showing up even when no one's clapping." For a long moment, we just stood there, the kettle humming softly behind us. Then she reached for my hand and squeezed it. When evening came, the sky burned gold over the Pacific. We ate dinner on the terrace, laughter echoing through the house. The ocean shimmered below, calm and vast, the same ocean that had once carried my desperation, now carrying my peace. After my family left, I returned to the deck alone. The stars had begun to rise, one by one. I leaned against the railing, closing my eyes, letting the sea breeze wash over me. I remembered the girl I once was, the one sitting at that Christmas table, swallowing her pride, while her brother called her job silly. I could still hear the clinking of wine glasses, the laughter, the ache in my chest. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her this. Don't let their laughter define you. Let it drive you. Let it shape you into something they'll never understand until it's too late. I opened my eyes again. The ocean stretched endlessly, reflecting the stars. It hit me then what revenge truly meant. It wasn't seeing my brother fall or my mother apologize or my name on magazine covers. It wasn't even the billion-dollar valuation or the recognition. Revenge was waking up every morning knowing I had built something that mattered. That I had taken every cruel word, every moment of doubt, every ounce of humiliation, and turned it into light for someone else. That was the real victory. I walked back inside and turned off the lights. The house glowed softly with the reflection of the moon on the water. On my desk, another unopened letter waited, another life, touched another reason to keep going. Before heading upstairs, I glanced back at the ocean one last time and whispered, "We did it, Grandpa. We really did it." Then, as the waves rolled in steady rhythm, I thought of every woman who had ever been dismissed, every daughter told she was wasting her time, every sister compared to someone louder or richer or better. To them, I would say, success isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. That's the truest revenge there is. And as the tide whispered against the shore, I knew this story, my story, wasn't ending. It was just beginning.